Okay, now for the record, this is November 29th, 2012, and we're meeting at the DLC, the Lawson Center, which is a museum and heritage center, formerly LS Aero-Marine, and as we always called it, Lawsons. We're with Dave Lawson, Jr., and with his friend Bruce Johnson, who has a lot of history in his head, and we're going to be picking some of this history, but I'd like to start with Dave.
Well, I think we'll start with, my dad bought here in 1918, and this is 73 Lakeside Drive in Bemis. He bought it from a bank, had been repossessed from John O. Johnson, who had run it before for probably about 20 years, as nearly as I can figure out. It had been a boat livery before, and had been storage in the downstairs area for motor launches and I think steam launches, although I've never seen any photos of steamboats. Probably they did not have private steamboats here because they needed a certified pilot and engineer. But anyway, my dad bought it, and at that time, up at the road was a garage. And the local people, the few people that had a car, would bring the car in every night for just to get it in out of the weather. And in the wintertime, the cars were put up on blocks. There was a boat dock. There was a gas pump that was up at the street level. And I remember my dad always talking about having to carry gasoline to fuel down to the boats at the dock. In about 1920, he built the wooden frame area that for the boathouse, expanded it, and that in the upper part, and that's where we are right now, was his boat shop. He built boats there. He maintained the other part as no longer as a garage, but that was for boat storage. Initially, from what I can tell, he built double-end rowboats that the local people could use for live bait fishing. That's about the only type of boat that the local people had. It was only later, as he got into the selling Chris crafts, that the true millionaires at that time, who came from Bradford and Oil City, they purchased boats. But my dad built several cat boats and some big cat boats. When I say big, 20-footers thereabouts. And then he built a power boat, and we have in our showroom a triple cockpit, 22-foot design that he made from plans made from John Hacker.
Yeah.
Now, when he bought it, and when this wooden part of the building was put up, it was called the Lawson Boat and Engine Company.
Now, did he built this part of it then?
Yes, you know, the steel work was done from outfit from Corey, and they also did the steel work on the addition that when the garage was torn down and the showroom was built.
Now, when was that?
That was in about 47, I think, 47.
The story that I get is that he got the materials and stuff from what was going to be the Chris Craft plant.
Yes, that's right. And So in 46 and into 47, Chris-Craft was, had a plant in Falconer, which was real handy for my dad to pick up boats down there. In 47, there was a time of strikes everywhere, and the workers for Chris-Craft went out on strike. Chris-Craft had purchased materials for adding on to their building, and Chris-Craft came to the union and, as I understand it, said, "This is our final offer." Union officials apparently doubted that because they saw the I-beams and all the timbers and everything out in the yard. Well, Chris-Craft pulled out. So the sales, it was building up, and my dad was outgrowing the facilities here. And my dad, in early 1929, bought down at the city line of Jamestown on Fontana Avenue. And this is on the fourth bend of the outlet, where years ago they used to haul out the steamboats sideways. This is where they repaired the steamboats. The crash came, and he was doing real well in selling Chris-Crafts. And he was doing the business with Jamestown Bank, where Ralph Sheldon Sr. was principal in the bank. And I'm sure my dad was in need of funds. And anyway, the corporation, LS Aero-Marine, was formed, I think with $40,000 of stock. So Ralph Sheldon was looking for something for his son to do, Ralph Sheldon Jr., who had been afflicted with polio when he was about 7 years old, I guess. And so Ralph Sheldon Jr. became basically a partner. He was secretary, treasurer of LS Aero-Marine, the corporation that was formed.
How was it with you when you were working with your mom and dad and then your sister Jean? Was it harmonious?
Yes, because we didn't know anything else. We both grew up in the business. The whole family was there. It was just a way of life. We worked during the season. We worked from 8 o'clock until 9 o'clock. 8 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock in the evening.
7 days a week.
Sunday it was 9 to 9.
Long week.
So, yeah, my mother always was glad to see Liberty come along. My dad was born in '86. He was probably old enough not to be drafted in World War I, but he was the only boy of 9 in the family. There were 4 girls older and 4 girls younger than he.
Tough position to be.
Well, so
I didn't even mention that.
any excuse he had while he was out of the house. So he was very hunted, fish trapped, all that sort of thing. And he did many other things prior to buying here. My dad bought here in 1918. He had a 6th grade education, and that was typical in those days. And he talked about taking his older sisters to school in Falconer. They lived sort of southeast of Falconer at that time, with a horse and buggy, and he'd fall asleep taking the horse back, and the horse would take it back again. But he He worked in a sports shop in Jamestown. He was a volunteer fireman in Jamestown. And he had answered an ad for an assistant curator at the Museum of Natural History in Colorado Springs. He went out there. He was taxidermist, helping the famous curator set up exhibits. And then this curator went to Chicago Museum of Natural History, and my dad followed him there, and he was there for several years. And my grandfather became ill, and one of my aunts went out to Chicago and brought my dad back home. So in 1927, he married my mother, who grew up on the farm, corner of what is now Salisbury Road and Town Line Road in Elwood. During World War I, my dad had the farm across the road, and that's how they met.
Dave, were you talking across the road on Town Line or across the road on Salisbury?
Salisbury.
That's the one I remember. Yeah.
My dad died in '71, March of '71. My mother had been in the office, of course, all this time. In about '68, I think it was, my dad fell on his tailbone, and so from '68 till he died, he really didn't get back up here in the business.
Now, through all those years, can you talk a little bit about some of the people that have worked at Aero-Marine? Do you remember some of those people? Bruce, you probably remember. I can remember Clarence Hansen.
I can remember maybe
Tom Lamphere.
half a dozen, yeah. Clarence Hansen,
Well, Clarence was our mechanic
mechanic.
from back about 1947, 48.
He had the garage on Main Street, didn't he?
Well, anyway, Clarence worked for many, many years. He was the old-time mechanic, and if I wasn't out on the dock, I was sitting there watching him grind valves and do all that sort of work.
I can remember the stick with the suction cups on the end. Clarence would get that down on that valve, and get that stick going for you, and that would valve, he'd pull that valve out and went like this around the valve seat. Those engines were a little prone to burning valves, weren't they, the Hercules?
Well, the problem was if you ran hard, like water skiing, and then you stopped to pick up the skier, you shut the engine off. The engine is real hot. Of course, when you shut it off, it doesn't have the cooling. And if the exhaust valve happens to be in the up position, it doesn't have any cooling. And if it's red hot, it warps a little bit. And then from then on, it doesn't seat right. And the exhaust gases go through and cuts the seat, cuts the valve.
I can remember Clarence telling several people, if you're out there running hard, you come back to the dock, let that engine run at 500 or 600 RPMs and let it cool down gradually, and
that makes sense.
Well, then there was Kenny Selden from Westfield, right?
Yes, Ken was initially from up below my grandparents' place, my uncle's place on Town Line Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
He was a brother to Ivan Selden, who was the school bus driver.
Yeah, Ivan was my school bus driver for years.
Yeah, mine too. Then there was Tom Lamphere.
I remember Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom and I used to play together all the time. We had a Grumman canoe, and would paddle over to Tom's Point all the time. Tom had a dog called Blackie.
Yes, I read, right.
And Blackie wouldn't get into the canoe, but he'd be on shore, run up and down the shore, just barking away all the time that we were out there.
How about in later years? Now, Bruce Airdsman has been part of the business for a long time.
Well, okay, Clarence must have gone before, in the late 60s. Because I think Bruce Airdsman started with us in 1968.
Really?
Yeah, on a part-time basis. He was, he delivered milk in the morning and then worked for us in the afternoons. Bruce still does the engine work. He, in order to keep him full-time, he does finishing work. He wouldn't let on that he's a good finisher. He is.
But he does mechanic work too, so
That's because
Oh,
you didn't
yes.
do it with a wrench, Dave.
that's incredible. 68 and still going.
Well, Clarence Hansen was a good finisher too.
Yes, he was.
He was a good mechanic, I know that. We always used to, in our spare time, whatever spare time we had, we'd come in and we'd have to scrape the cylinder heads,
Yeah.
get the carbon out of the cylinder area, and scrape the gasket stuff out. That kind of broke up all the hectic stuff on the dock. And then we would help out moving the boats. It seemed like people would come in like for the weekend, and they'd want their boat. So you went hiking down to Woodlawn or down to Clifton and got a boat, brought it up, they used it for the weekend, and then back away.
My sister and myself ran the business. She developed mononucleosis, and she had to give up her job, but she came home in the summer times, and so she worked here at Aero-Marine. So you're familiar with what she did there.
I remember that.
Yeah. She sort of took care of all the dock boys, those working on the dock, and
She was the taskmaster.
Yeah.
She kept us in line.
yeah,
I do remember that.
helped in sales in the showroom.
You want to talk a little bit about your family, where you lived and where you grew up, and your sister Jean?
Well, I was born in '33, and so I was always on the dock, tagging around, and I always tagged around after my father. When I was on the dock, always trying to see what's going on, trying to stay out of the way, and often backed up, and I've been told that I've been fished out of the water 3 or 4 times in one day. I remember I sort of grew up with a 22-foot, 26-foot, 1928 Chris Craft. And that's where I learned how to drive a powerboat. Probably 5 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
My sister was born in 1928, Christmas Eve. And my sister was going to school in Fluvanna, which was 1 through 6. For the most part, we lived across the road on Fluvanna Avenue, just outside Jamestown. At that time, we were staying here in September's, and then mid-May through the rest of the summer. So I started kindergarten here, and then I rode the bus because I was just outside we lived just outside the city in the Demus Point School District. So I rode the bus in kindergarten in those days was a full day. So I can't remember another kid riding a bus of my age. I was usually the last one on the bus in the morning, but at night the bus would turn up Strunk Road, go over Moon Road, go all the way up West Oak Hill Road, turn around, and then come down.
It's a whole township.
Come down through the city, and then drop me off.
You got within a half a mile and then had to go 4, right?
There were 3 of us that were in competition all the time, friendly competition. We were all good friends. We've been together since kindergarten. Dave Dorman Jr.
Remember Ambrose?
Oh, yeah.
and Warren Powell
Oh, yes.
and myself. So we always competed friendly-wise, whether it was grades or for sports. And we were fortunate here, so it ended up, all 3 of us were valedictorians. I for Bemis Point.
Isn't that wild?
Dave was for Cherry Creek, and Warren was Johnson City.
Okay.
I was born in 33, started school in 38. Okay, I graduated in 51.
You graduated in 51.
Everybody wanted to know where I was going to go to college. I mean, that was my sister had gone to Cornell. But anyway, there was a story in the article in the Saturday Evening Post about a place called Webb Institute of Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering in Glen Cove, Long Island. And so I applied for that, and that's where I went to school, and that's where I got my degree. Yes, Naval Architecture and Marine Engineering. And we had a 10-week work period each January, February, and into March, where we went out into the industry and worked so that we could see what we wanted to do. My freshman year, I was at an apprentice program in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, welding and machine work. Sophomore year, we were called engine cadets on board a merchant ship. 2 of us went to Germany twice. Junior year, I worked at Chris Craft in the Algonac on their production line, and helped make the first, I think it was a 34-foot boat. I initially was working on a 52-foot, doing the setup and planking of that. Senior year, I worked at Bethlehem Steel Shipbuilding in Quincy, Mass, outside of Boston. And they were designing and going to build a ship for race lines. That's where I quickly learned that I was not going to stay in an office for the rest of my life. So, during all the time that I was in college, the draft board was breathing down my neck. And while we were at Boston area, applied for Officer Candidate School, and ended up, I graduated on Saturday, in the first week in July, and went to Officer Candidate School in Newport the next day. Got out of Officer Candidate School in November, went to 10 weeks of training at Treasure Island in California for damage control and for what was at that time called ABC School, which was Atomic, Biological, and Chemical School. Then I went to San Diego to Landing Ship Dock, which is about a 435-foot floating dry dock, self-propelled floating dry dock, you might say. My sister was in New York initially at the same time that I was at Webb Institute out at Glen Cove, Long Island. So, and especially the first year when I was at the shipyard in Brooklyn, I would go up to her apartment over the weekends. When I went in the Navy, she, about halfway through there, she developed mononucleosis. And she had to give up her job, but she came home in the summer times, and so she worked here at Aero-Marine. Went back to New York doing consulting work in the wintertime and here in the summertime. And probably somewhere around 72 or so, she was here full time. I'm just sorry that my dad, my mother, and especially my sister didn't see this come about.
Yeah.
My sister was the artistic side of things. She would have been able to do a lot of things and setting it up. Many of the things that we have are things that she collected. She had been photography curator down at the Fenton for several years. But things like the anchor display that we have, the patent anchors, many of the photos of this area, this piece of property, and of the various boats she had collected. Yeah, my only regret is that they did not see this happen.
Do you think there could have been an inkling of any sorts back then, Dave?
Well, I often think that my sister had that in mind.
Just a little recollection of the village. If you could just tell me what you think was one of the biggest changes that you've seen in the village. You've been around longer than I have.
I don't know that there's a lot of changes. The people that bought boats were millionaires back in the 20s and into the 30s. And they came, for the most part, they came from Oil City, Bradford, some Warren.
All out of the area.
Some Pittsburgh?
The Schroeders were from Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But other than that, the things that I remember were Memorial Day Parade, which was a really big thing for the school children especially. 4th of July with the fireworks at the steamboat dock. People have no idea that there was a dock there. And the other thing is the property between Main Street going down Lakeside Drive on the lakefront property, that used to be village property. That was lost, which was a big shame. And I also remember in 1940 and 41, they had the American Powerboat Association outboard races.
You remember those races?
Oh, sure.
Sanctioned races here.
Back in about the 50 era, I remember those.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
in 40 and 41, these were big time operations with just an 8-foot hydroplane, 8 to 10-foot hydroplane with a Johnson 22 horsepower. They burned alcohol, they used the castor oil as a lubricant, and you could smell that castor oil all over Venus.
Yeah. I asked Bruce Mayrow when he was there. He thought that the biggest change that he thought in the village was when they took the hill down and built the elementary school.
Yeah.
He said,
Bill Shepherdson's property.
Yeah.
Yeah, knocked that gravel pit right down and
Filled the pit.
built the school there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And then, of course, the school going up on Dutch Hollow.
Chow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can remember Dick Evans quoting that as the owner of the golf course, he would have sold the school property, all the property they needed to build a new school there. And as we know now, it didn't happen.
Well, it was a case of we're going to build anywhere other than Bemis Point.
Yeah.
I remember when the baseball field was made, and that was one of the best, if not the best, baseball field in Chautauqua County.
It's still there.
Because of the gravel subsoil?
Yeah, I think so, and the way it's laid out.
And it's level.
And, you know, level, and Dave Dorman did a great job of getting that going. But we were kids, I always considered myself part of Bemis Point,
Sure.
because I spent all the summers here and went to
Sure.
school here.
Sure.
But we used to get together on Saturday mornings, get John Thompson out of his house. And John would come over and we'd have a pickup game with Fluvanna Greenhurst people. And John would be the umpire.
I think one of our biggest assets too is the fact we have the village park. Ever since I was just a little guy, I can remember when the dock went out on the south side of the casino, and that was there for many, many years. And what times that kids of all ages had in that park, to include myself and then my two children we were living right down there at that time. My kids were little, and they'd have classes down there, and kids would take their little lunch bags and go down and attend the class, and then come back in a couple hours. And you know, that was wonderful. So there's a lot of things still that are great.